Hi folks, my name is Mike Dobbs and you're watching Focus Springfield, and the name of the show is Government Matters, and today we have State Rep Orlando Ramos talking to us, and thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy being on the show.
So we're coming toward the end of the summer, and I know the beginning of a new legislative session is looming up there. I'd like to ask you, while you've been out of session, what have people been talking to you about their concerns? What are they concerned about? What are they worried about? What do they see that they hope has some action to address things?
Well, I think the priorities remain the same. I think a lot of people are worried about the economy. A lot of people are worried about public safety. I think that's something that really never goes away. But the challenge that we've had in this session that is different than any other time that I can remember is the pushback and the resistance that we have at the federal level with this president who basically his ideology is complete opposite of what Massachusetts stands for. And that makes it very difficult because we've accomplished a lot over the last few years as a legislature. We've been able to do things like free lunches for the schools. We've been able to do things like protect people's identity when they're seeking some services, health services. And now we have a federal administration that's trying to undo all of that. And it makes it very difficult. I tell people all the time, these next 4 years are going to be very different. Whereas in the last few years, Massachusetts has been in a very good position to be able to fund a lot of the initiatives that we've done. It's not guaranteed that that's going to continue over the next 4 years because we're facing a lot of federal cuts.
Well, I mean, one thing I've got written on my pad here is clawback, which is this unique word that has now surfaced, right, with the federal government saying, okay, we're going to bring back money that we allocated. I am not a legal scholar. I always thought that when Congress passed a budget that would contain allocations to the states, that is law, and there's a certain kind of legislative protocol that must go along with trying to cancel an allocation. Instead, he's just saying we're not giving it to you. I know here in Springfield, we lost, and please correct me if I'm wrong with this, I think it was $40 or $42 million that was going to go to the school department was for specific kind of programs, which now if we're going to have those programs, we have to find that kind of money. And I can only imagine that this has been replicated many times across the Commonwealth for many other kinds of programs. And I guess the question to you as a member of the General Court is, do you think that we have the resources to replace, as a state, do we have the resources to replace this federal money that's been stopped in order to maintain these services? You talked about free lunch. This is an essential service in a city like Springfield, absolutely, a gateway city, absolutely, with a large population of people who are living, if not at the poverty line, below the poverty line. So do you think that we can match this missing federal money, or do you think that the challenge is going to be how we use the money best to get to replace these programs the most?
Right. Well, the answer to the first question is no. We don't have enough resources to be able to cover that. I believe we get something like $15 billion from the federal government each year, and Massachusetts reserves is something like 12. So we don't even have enough to cover 1 year.
Right.
If we lost all federal funding.
And then we have no resources.
Right, exactly. So we don't. And so the challenge is, we can backfill wherever we can. We can try to, backfill here and there just to, patch things up as best we can. But unfortunately, it's going to get to the point where we have to start cutting services. And again, because we're not receiving that money from the federal government, unfortunately, when we start doing that, people are going to look at the legislature and say, you cut my funding. But the reality is that funding was cut the day that he was elected president, because everybody knew that that's what he was going to do to Massachusetts. And that's elections have consequences. And unfortunately, that's one of the consequences that I see coming.
What's interesting to me is the role of governors and what they're playing. I mean, right now we have two Democratic governors who have been very, very vocal against the Trump administration, the governor of Illinois, and now Gavin Newsom, the governor of California.
Right.
And I know Governor Healy has done some public pushback. Do you think we need to be more aggressive and more public about saying, let's ID the money that we're not getting that we used to and what it was for, and be a little bit more aggressive about being critical of Trump?
Yeah, I think everybody has to do that. I think the people who voted for Trump and regret it needs to say so. That his election has had consequences on their lives. I don't think Massachusetts has to be alone in this. I think we have to partner with the other states, and yes, be more critical of what he's doing, because we're stuck with him for the next 3.5 years. And so we have to live with what we have and be able to do the best with what we have. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that there's any, we've tried going to the courts. We tried suing. I know the Attorney General has been in and out of court with the Trump administration. I think we have to continue that pressure. But it's unfortunate that we also have a Supreme Court that doesn't necessarily side with common sense. They're also siding with the Trump administration. Right.
Well, I took a look at a piece that appeared earlier this year when you were facing the past legislative session, things that you want to get done. So I thought I would ask you about some of these issues.
Okay.
Because I think one misconception that many people have about the legislative process is it takes time. And many legislators have to refile bills because it just doesn't go through the system as quickly or as good as it should go through. I can't remember, someone told me there was like 800 bills a year filed or something.
5,000.
5,000, okay. So this is why a lot of times bills have to go through a second or third time. One of the things that you marked as a priority, and I'm sure you've been working on it, is the Safe Swimming Bill, which would basically teach kids who might not have an opportunity to know how to swim, to learn how to swim.
Yes.
And it's not just for a sport or activity, it's actually also safety.
Absolutely.
So how's the status of that bill?
Well, that's a refile, so I had to refile it this session because it didn't get out of committee the last session, unfortunately. I think there's enough support for the idea itself. The question is, how do we get there? Because what my bill says is we're trying to undo something that was done back in 2004 under the Romney administration, where he essentially said, well, swimming pools in schools are a luxury. They're not necessarily a necessity. And so the state is no longer going to cover the cost of swimming pools.
Yep.
What that has led to is cities like the city of Springfield, gateway cities, we no longer have swimming pools in our schools because we can't afford to build them ourselves. So where can the kids in Springfield go to learn how to swim? Now they have less places to learn how to swim.
Right.
There aren't a lot of houses in the city of Springfield that have private pools. We aren't like the suburbs. A lot of the suburbs have swimming pools. We don't have them here in the city of Springfield. A lot of the lots is too small, etc. So what my bill would do is reverse that decision and allow the school building commission to fund the building of swimming pools in schools for up to 80%. What that would do is create spaces for kids to learn how to swim, and that's why it's called the Safe Swimming Bill. Because like you said, it's not just a luxury, it's a life-saving measure. Studies have shown that minority kids are 4 times more likely than non-minority children to drown and to have no swimming ability. I didn't have a swimming pool.
Sure.
I didn't have a swimming pool in my school. I never learned how to swim until I was an adult, right? So those are the things that we want to change with this bill.
Well, that would be great, and I think it's it's essential for people to have these kinds of simple safety skills. So if something happens, they don't panic and drown. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Another thing that you were working on, apparently there's a loophole in property tax legislation that allows Eversource not to pay the amount of property tax that you and I pay in terms of the amounts and percentage of property tax.
Right.
And I know you were working on that. What's the status of that? Because that's really important too.
Well, that's another. So what Eversource was doing was using a loophole that was created for small businesses and homeowners. This loophole, this law says that if you owe the city, your municipality, a certain amount of money for property taxes, if you appeal, then you're only responsible for paying 50% of that bill until the appeal is resolved. And what Eversource has done is they've exploited that, and they've used it for 10 years in a row. Every single year they lost the appeal, but in the meantime they were withholding millions of dollars from the city of Springfield, and at one point it was $41 million.
Wow.
And they kept doing it, knowing that they can get away with it, knowing that they didn't have to pay the bill that they appealed. So my bill will close that loophole to make sure that it stays open for the small businesses and for homeowners who are struggling to pay their bills. This law was not created for multi-billion-dollar utility companies, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to change.
Is it in committee now, or do you have to refile it? Or
I refiled it. It was another refile. I do have some hope that we're going to be able to include it in a municipal enhancement bill that we're going to be doing. As part of a larger package. We're going to be tackling that at some point during this session. So I'm very hopeful about this one because I know that the governor is very aware of the loophole and she's concerned as well. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get this one passed in this session.
Well, I think this is going to be very disturbing for people to hear, and disturbing that they may not have heard about this issue when you were first talking about it, which is one reason I brought this up, because everyone's Eversource bills are of great interest. There's a lot of discussion about electric rates in Massachusetts and whether or not those electric rates are keeping people from coming here, keeping businesses from coming here or expanding. So I think that any scrutiny that the legislature places on existing laws like this is well worth it, and I appreciate that you're doing this.
Thank you.
I'm an old man, and all the kids these days are talking about AI. I'm proud to say that I have not experimented with AI in any way, shape, or form because I don't want those machines to learn any more than what they already learn. And the reason I bring up AI is the facial recognition software, which you have been very much a leader in being very critical of it. Because certainly when it comes to the uses of artificial intelligence, the facial software stuff is right up at the top. Now, I know for some people this is controversial because they view it as a means it's a tool for public safety organizations to further enhance the quality of life in our communities. But at the same time, there are critics of it, such as yourself, who believe that maybe it goes too far, maybe it's going to be used in the wrong way or the wrong circumstance. So what's the status of the facial recognition legislation that you were advocating for?
Well, the bill has garnered a lot of support. In fact, it was made one of our top priorities in the Massachusetts Black and Latino Caucus. And we just recently met with the Speaker of the House to talk about the bill and the importance of the bill. If you remember, some people may or may not remember that 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago in 2022, we actually passed it in the House, but it failed in the Senate. So I'm hopeful that this time around we'll be able to pass it in both chambers. The danger is that as it stands right now, facial surveillance is unregulated in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which means that anybody can use it or abuse it in any way. And the concern is what happens when it lands on the hands of law enforcement and they're able to use it any way that they want to. That's one of the reasons why I filed a pause ordinance here in the city of Springfield back in 2019, I believe it was 2020. Actually, it was 2020, right before the pandemic started. And we were just the 5th municipality to pass facial surveillance in the entire country. So when I got elected to the State House, I said this is going to be one of my top priority bills because I believe that we have to protect people statewide. And the original bill that I filed was a complete ban on facial surveillance. My compromise bill is regulation of facial surveillance. As a result of the police reform bill that was passed in 2020, before I got there, the state legislature created a facial recognition commission, which was made up of lawyers. It was made up of a member of the NAACP, the ACLU, the retired police chiefs, the state police, 15-member board that was nonpartisan. And they were tasked with the task of creating regulations as to how and when this should be used. And they came up with a 31-page report that was very informative, and they made recommendations as to when and how the state police or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts can use this type of technology. 2 of the highlights that I can give you from that is, number 1, they would need a warrant, which I believe is very important. And secondly, it would be held in a centralized location where the Massachusetts State Police would have a trained officer or trooper that would be an expert in the person that uses the facial surveillance technology. In other words, not every police officer will have the right to use it or the ability to use it. Similar to what we did back in the 80s with DNA. We can't have every officer testing DNA on the field. Right. You have to be an expert, and you got to go to the expert to use it. So it's the same thing with facial surveillance technology. So my amended bill is, and the one that was passed back in 2022, is regulation, which essentially codifies the recommendations of that commission into law.
So right now, anybody can use this if they have the software and that type of thing?
They are using it. The DMV uses facial surveillance technology, and there really isn't any regulation. We try to get answers as to how and when they use it, for what purpose, and we haven't been able to. So,
do you see it being a privacy issue, a legal rights issue? Then
it's definitely a privacy issue. And the concern, in addition to that, is the fact that it misidentifies a lot of people. This technology is not ready for prime time. There are studies that have shown that the technology is can be helpful in some situations, but in a lot of studies, it's something like 70% accurate or 80% accurate. In fact, most studies have shown that facial surveillance technology is 35% more likely to misidentify people with darker skin tone. And so that puts people of color in danger.
Right.
And so, that's a concern. We can't have technologies that's going to be misidentifying people, especially when you're talking about their interaction with law enforcement. That can be very dangerous. And there have been multiple situations across the country where facial surveillance technology has misidentified a person of color and put them in a bad situation where they're handcuffed in front of their families. That's not acceptable. Well, we got to be more accountable, and we have to make sure that we have technology that's going to be accurate and that the people that are using it are trained as to how to use it.
Indeed. So I live in Maple Eye Six Corners, and I have to say, knock on wood, this has been a relatively quiet summer when it comes to another one of your issues, dirt bikes, illegal dirt bikes. It has been much more quiet in my neighborhood, although we got some guy with an ATV who likes going up and down the street Sunday morning as loud as he possibly can. But I haven't seen as much of the illegal dirt bike activity, and for a while it was really bad in this city. I know that you have been very active about trying to do something about that situation. Where does that stand at this point?
Well, the dirt bike issue, again, is, like you said, is something that it's not just a Springfield problem, it's a regional problem. It's actually a national problem. A lot of big cities and mid-sized cities have been dealing with. We have been able to make a lot of changes. When I was on the city council, we passed 3 pieces of legislation. One was we created municipal fines for the illegal operation of off-highway vehicles. The second ordinance was a home rule petition that allowed police officers to confiscate and destroy the dirt bikes. And the third piece of legislation that I passed on the city council was a prohibition for gas stations to sell gasoline to these dirt bikes. Thankfully, a lot of, I think one or two other surrounding towns did the same thing. And that has led to a decrease in the amount of dirt bikes that you see on the road, and the amount of incidents involving illegal dirt bikes.
Right.
So, but we have to do more, and we have to continue to be vigilant. The home rule petition, unfortunately, hasn't passed through the legislature. I have had conversations with the city of Springfield about refiling that, but because of the time span, the city council will have to vote on it once again in order for me to refile it at the state level. So that's where we stand right now, waiting on the city council to pass a home rule petition that will allow police officers to confiscate and destroy these dirt bikes once they catch them, because otherwise, as it stands right now, if they get an illegal dirt bike, they have to auction it off. They have to send it to the auction, which means that it ends up back in circulation.
Right.
And some of these people, some of these riders, they actually buy their dirt bike back at the auction.
Sure.
So, what are we doing here? We're just spinning our wheels. So I think that it's an important piece of legislation, and I'm hopeful that the city council will move on it so that I can refile it in the House.
Well, this is certainly nothing new for our city or other cities.
Right.
I remember covering a press conference when Police Chief Palomera was in office. She wanted to have legislation that it would allow not just the confiscation, but then actually to bring it to an auto yard and have them crushed,
Right.
like a junk car,
Right.
just to physically take them out of circulation.
Yes.
So this isn't a new problem for us, but I will say, now I'll go home tonight and streets will be filled with them, but I've seen far less activity in my neighborhood, and which is a good thing. It's a public safety issue.
Absolutely.
So looking at this legislative session, knowing that one of the axes hanging over our head is the clawback of federal money and how we're going to deal with that, are there new issues that you've identified and your constituents identified that you would like to file bills about, you'd like to develop? Are there things that are new that have been brought to you that you say, yeah, we got to do something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are several issues that I am exploring. Some of them will take some time, and they'll take multiple meetings with council. I have a lot of ideas about how we can improve our city, but at the end of the day, the legislation that we file, we got to make sure that it's not contradictory to the Constitution or to any other existing laws. So it's a process. It's a little bit of a process. Right now, I have 27 bills pending in the House. It's the most that I filed in any session, but each one is very important. Each one has the potential to change people's lives, the potential to change the perception of the city of Springfield. And at the end of the day, that's my goal as a legislature, is to help improve people's lives.
Well, I think that we're in a very, very challenging time now. I think we're always in the challenging times. There's always challenges, but I think right now the relationship with the federal government creates a great deal of pressure for states and a great deal of pressure for a state like Massachusetts. We were talking about ties, and I think I really want people to know what you're doing about this.
Okay.
And just so you know, I was born in New Mexico, and on my birth certificate, it says I'm allowed to wear Western wear, okay? Just before anyone questions this. And we were talking about ties, and you're doing something that I think is incredibly needed and also incredibly cool. Can you tell us about that?
It's called Ties to Success. It's a new initiative that I created earlier this year with the goal in mind of teaching young people how to tie a tie, because it's a I think underappreciated and task and skill that a lot of people just don't realize. So my goal is to teach every high school student in the Springfield Public Schools how to tie a tie. This year we started with a small group. It was something like 30 students at Putnam Voc, and we had the help of a lot of, a lot of influential people in the city of Springfield. There were legislators, CEOs of companies here in the city, doctors and lawyers, and that's part of my goal too. It's not just teaching them how to tie a tie. It's also giving them the opportunity to spend a few minutes with someone who is a CEO, to someone that is a positive role model here in the city of Springfield, because you never know, that person one day might be interviewing you for a job.
Right, exactly.
Right. So, and you want to make those connections, right? So, and I know that's something, we're always looking for new talent. So that's, I think, an important piece to my initiative is it's not just the teaching of how to tie a tie, but it's the opportunity to be able to spend time with a positive role model who lives right here or works right here in the city of Springfield. Again, we started with 30 students this year. We got donations from the participants of the mentors, I call them, that participated in that initiative, and we're hopeful that next year we're going to do it even bigger and better. And again, with the goal in mind that we're going to teach every student in the Springfield Public Schools, graduating senior in the public schools, how to tie a tie.
Well, this sort of dovetails into the whole Suit Up Springfield program. It's one thing if you get business clothes that you can use. It's another thing if you stare at that piece of cloth that's supposed to be tied around your neck going, what am I supposed to do with this? And if you told me that you learned how to tie through YouTube.
I did.
And thank God for YouTube. It teaches us a lot of things. But I think that this might sound like a small thing, but it's not a small thing. It's a skill that young men are expected to know. And by wearing a tie, it signifies something that can aid them in the pursuit of a job or a career.
Absolutely. And that's, again, one of the important parts is spending that time with those people in the room. We were all able to share our stories about how we learned how to tie, how we learned how to tie a tie, and the importance. And for example, Sheriff Kochi was there, and he talked about how people treated him differently when he wore a suit. There was a realtor, Ed Nunez, who was there, and he talked about how it changed the perception of how people looked at him at work. So, it's an important skill.
Right.
And it does really change a person. It makes you feel a little different when you're wearing a tie.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. State Rep, you're always welcome here. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
I understand we'll probably see you Wednesday at the Sheriff's Picnic. We'll probably grab you and talk to you a little bit more at that event. And folks, I want to thank you very much for tuning in to another edition of Government Matters here on Focus Springfield.